What up, peeps? Your friendly neighborhood Monomachus here speaking to you from stately Monomachus Manor. Empty, but I need it. What we have all feared is seemingly coming to pass. In the previous vlog, I said about unintended consequences. Well, now we know one such unintended consequence. Russia is going to probably recognize the tiny but official Turkish Orthodox Church. They are going to create dioceses in Turkey for the growing Russian community that lives there permanently, but also for the 5 million or so Russian tourists that go to Turkey every year as pilgrims, vacationers, whatever. Well, you can read a lot of this on Byzantine Texas, which I recommend. There are several blog posts that he has posted. And there are a lot of canonical irregularities on both sides, I think. But I just want to talk about the pragmatic consequences of what the present ecumenical patriarch is doing. I want to leave aside the ecclesiology. I want to leave aside the canons. I want to leave aside the spirituality, theology, all that. I just want to talk about the pragmatic. The thing that came to my mind, first of all, because I live in the real world, in business and stuff like this, and I see consequences to actions that businessmen or tradesmen or professionals have to expect when they do something. For instance, I'm a pharmacist, as you know. We have an opioid crisis, supposedly. Well, to combat it, the federal government has put many restrictions on healthcare professionals, doctors and pharmacists both, as far as the giving out of opioids. Okay, and it's made things rather difficult to practice pharmacy and medicine because of this. But there was a consequence to this. I mean, there was a problem. The government said, well, this is how we're going to fix the problem. Unfortunately, there are now consequences. So one of the consequences, unintended, is that people who really need these drugs are now going to Mexico and getting them on the street, or whatever. That's a consequence. Okay? We have to live with them. And my dog. Nobody is immune from consequences in this world because it is a fallen world. Today I just want to talk about the consequences, unintended, pragmatic, and administrative, that Constantinople is unleashing. The first thing that popped into my mind was that every patriarch or metropolitan of an autocephalous church is going to be shocked, even if he's sympathetic to the plight of the Ukrainians. Why? Well, because there's a canonical church already in Ukraine. They did not ask for this series of actions which the present ecumenical patriarchate is undertaking. They didn't ask for it. Okay. Let me give you a historical example. The Metropolia, which is the parent organization of the earlier incarnation of the OCA, well, they had a problem being under a Soviet-dominated patriarchate. And 50 years ago, they sent a delegation to Istanbul to meet with then Patriarch Athenagoras. And they said, look, can we come under you? We can't be under Moscow. And in his wisdom, in his pastoral concern, he said, you are Russians. Go to Russia. Resolve this issue for yourselves. So they did. They went to Russia. Russia said, okay, we're going to recognize you as an autocephalous church. Case closed. He said, go to Russia. Whatever Russia decides, it's good enough for me. I don't think he expected that, but you've always got to look at two sides of the coin, okay? And you got to look at both outcomes, or 4 outcomes, or 8 outcomes, or whatever, how many possible outcomes. And if you give your permission, then you have to live with that consequence. Alrighty? Now, Ukraine did not do this. They did not ask for autocephaly. They did not ask for the Ecumenical Patriarch to get involved. Not the canonical church. The illegal Ukrainian regime did, which was created by a neoconservative cabal in the State Department. Let us never forget that. Okay, so what does this mean? This means that every patriarch, every metropolitan of every autocephalous church is now thinking, well, what's going to stop the ecumenical patriarchate, whether it's this particular patriarch or a future one, from doing the same thing? Nothing. Not at all. Especially since these hyperbolic statements that have come out from the Cretan Robber Council, which have stated that that only Constantinople can grant autocephaly, and Constantinople is in fact the mother church of all of Orthodoxy, which of course is not true. But because these statements, these hyperbolic statements, are in the mindset of the Fanar, as is presently constituted, they feel it's the reality. What's going to stop some ecumenical patriarch from going into Bulgaria because maybe there's been a Macedonian Orthodox sect that has opened up? Probably with State Department help. Or a Macedonian Orthodox sect that's opened up in Greece, or a Vlach. The Vlachs are a minority. Okay, what's going to stop them? What's going to stop them from going into Antioch? Now, let's say several thousand Kurds convert to Orthodoxy and they set up Orthodox churches there. And they're saying, we want an autocephalous church here, right in the middle of the territory of Antioch. Nothing. Nothing at all. What I'm trying to say is that simply on a prudential basis, this has a horrendous precedent. And it's going to blow up in the face of the Fanar. And we're seeing it to start blow up now because, Russia's going to set up their own dioceses in Turkey. Why not? There's maybe 1,500 to 2,000 ethnic Greeks living within Turkey as is presently constituted. There are several thousand Russians who live in Turkey full time. And then there are the 5 million or so tourists that go every year. There you go. So turnabout is fair play. I can't say I didn't warn you. I didn't expect this as an unintended consequence. Personally, what I was thinking would happen that the Holy Mountain would ask for a contingent of Russian soldiers, possibly a battalion or two, to set themselves up in residence on Athos, so that the present anti-Christian Greek government cannot impose its will on them, which it wants to. And they're already an autonomous republic. They can invite anybody in. Just like Assad, I don't care what side of the divide you come on the Syria situation. The Russians were invited in by the Assad regime, which is the legitimate regime of Syria, recognized as such by the United Nations and even by the United States up until several years ago. So that's what I was thinking was going to happen, is that the presidium of the Athenite Republic would invite Russian soldiers to come and just be stationed there and just kind of like, vacation, have a good time, pray, we'll feed you, just as a tripwire. That's what I thought. This, of course, is even more bold. And remember, I said back in May, in another vlog, which it was called Checkmate, in which the Pope spoke very glowingly about the Russian Patriarchate for his own reasons. And I thought, wow, this is audacious. Well, the possible recognition of the tiny Turkish Orthodox Church and the establishment of Russian dioceses and the recognition by, say, within 5 years of this new reality on the ground in Turkey will be recognized by Russia and the rest of the Orthodox world. Why not? And then when it's time for the present patriarch of Constantinople to retire or repose in the Lord, it'll be interesting who's going to be the next one, won't it? And this may be the way that this globalist game that the globalists have been playing for these many decades now with the Orthodox Church, specifically the Patriarchate of Constantinople, is going to come to a close. Remember what I also said, the Russians are very patient. They know how to play the long game. And I've mentioned this as an example. During the 90s, when the Soviet Union split up, and I think it was in 91, Ukraine got their formal independence and recognition. What did they do? They gave up their nuclear weapons. They all went back to Russia. I think they wish now they hadn't have done that. But the Russians were patient. Anyway, I think we need to pray. Fasting would be in order. And I think we need to pray for everybody, for all concerned, including the Ecumenical Patriarch, that he comes to his senses. In the meantime, Pax Vobiscum. Let's try to love one another. Adios.